tuanzie conversation na dhambi. What is sin?
Okay, thank you so much for that particular question.
Karibu.
Sin, according to spirituality that I follow personally, is the original definition of sin. When you look at the Hebrew, definition is missing a mark. To sin is to miss a mark. But then what marks do we miss? When you're told you're missing a mark, then what marks do we miss? And according to my understanding of it is everybody has a soul path that they follow. And before you come into this particular dimension, there's a soul path that is tailor-made specifically for you as a person. So as you move through this soul path, there are marks that are there to lead you in the correct soul path. Take for example, ulikuwa unatembea kwa barabara and then kuna two splashes of light that are leading you to a particular destination. So every time you miss these particular marks, and what are they in your life? Whenever you're missing a mark, it's like you're running against the current, okay? You're betraying yourself, There's internal conflict between what you personally feel aligned with and the path that you're taking. So every time you miss these particular marks on your soul path, then you fall out of alignment with yourself. Every time you fail to choose yourself, you fall out of alignment with yourself. And when you fall out of alignment with yourself, you move away from the advanced version of yourself, from your destination. So to me, that is the definition, the very definition of sin.
Okay, now in English now, if you were to explain what we consider as sin, like the 10 Commandments, do not covet, do not attempt to make children before marriage. Like, you don't consider that sin?
Personally, when it comes to my definition of sin, it has everything to do with you as a person. It has everything to do with your own path as a person. And it has nothing to do with your external environment. It has nothing to do with the laws that society has set, because all these laws are contextual. The time that we live in is very different from the time that other people live in. And some of these laws that we follow right now were created at a time when those people, like for example, the Israelites, they were dealing with totally different things from what we deal with now. And so our existence as at now, all of us have our own inner system of guidance, intuition. We all have a gut feeling, inner system of guidance. And every time you go against this inner system of guidance, you are missing the marks. And so you are falling out of alignment with yourself. It has nothing to do with society. It has nothing to do with governmental laws. Yes. It has nothing to do with the Levitical laws. It has everything to do with you as a person. Okay. When I do good, I feel good. When I do bad, I feel bad. And so
when you do bad and feel good, you are...
It's bad according to who? It's bad according to who? Because at the end of the day, we all come here to vouch for ourselves. We all come here to expand as individuals. Yes. So the journey is... as within, so without. The journey it starts from within.
So you are the one who determines what sin is.
Yeah, for example, one of my examples of sin is like staying in a toxic relationship. And you know that this is affecting you as a person. You're betraying yourself, but you keep staying in that particular relationship. You're missing the mark. You're stunting your growth. Okay. You are causing delay in your soul path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. T,
yeah.
How do you explain sin from the kind of spirituality that a Christian practices?
It's missing the mark, and that mark is set by God. You don't set your own mark. You see, a lot of things she's saying are very deep, but trying to exclude God from the picture, that you have a soul path. Who created that path? Because you're not a driver of yourself. So we are dealing with what we are calling the new age philosophy, where we want to kick God out of the equation, and now we're introducing meism. It's me. So don't give me these external parameters. But at the end of the day, the 10 Commandments resonate perfectly with what we call the law of morality. Killing, whether in Israel or in Turkana, is killing. It's whether in government or out, according to the law of morality, which every man is aligned to a certain moral pattern, which is beyond logical analysis. It's an alignment. Yani ulizaliwa ukiwa na hizi vitu ndani yako, huwezi zikataa, ziko ndani yako. Lakini sasa ukianza kuangalia the source of morality, unadiscover kuna divine force, na hiyo divine force ni God. So hizo marks ni God ameweka. Na man haizi survive bila governance. Na man anakuanga kwa book ya Romans inasemanga since they rejected God, God permitted them to walk in their reprobate minds. Ama kwa lugha ya Kiswahili, Mungu aliallow watembee na wenda wazimu wao. Alafu hapo sasa inaanza kubonga, nasema na ndio maana waka lose desire ya men, wakaanza kudozi na wanaume, maledi wakaanza kudozi na maledi. So ni kumaanisha kila binadamu akona kawenda wazimu kake akikosa kuwa guarded by God, because we can't govern ourselves. So anything that God has instructed me to do and I don't do it, then I consider that as missing the mark, because it is God who sets the mark. Secondly, ni mdeep sana kwa hizo spirituality, but pali definitive factor ukuja ni ati spirituality kuna 2 dimensions. Kuna the fallen status tunaitanga the demonic world, na kuna the status yenye mesimama, which is where God is. So when you study totality of spirituality, inakuanga na legalism, inakuanga na protocols, iko na system ya operation. But now kuna level sasa unakutanga sasa umeingia uchawi na ujui. So baka to define ni spirituality gani una deal nayo. Unaweza kuwa umeingia realm fulani, sasa tuna deal na mapepo. Na bado ni intellectual, ni deep sana, ni intellectual. So mimi nikiangalia kutoka kwa scripture, kuna place naweza anza kusieve niseme hapa tumeingia witchcraft. Hapa bado tuko kwa ufalme.
Sawa, and one of the interesting lines that needed clarification ni soul ties.
Yes.
Like Vivian explained to us that soul ties are not as we assume they are. Like when we talk of, nilipatia kina Jemo na Vivian example ya ukiniambia wewe ukidoze na msee mtaenda kuchomeka na wale watu wameidoze nao wote, wakasema that's not how it works. Would you clarify that?
Mimi nikupe example.
Yes.
Vile iko Bible nasema when you sleep with a prostitute you become one with a prostitute. Na hiyo concept ya union inakuanga wakati man anakuwa declared husband and wife. That is what we call the wedding. But the marriage happens when they commune, hiyo sexual intercourse. Ndio Jesus kwa Matthew anakuja anasema divorce si permitted unless kwa case infidelity, kwa sababu sasa umeabandon hii union, umeenda umekuwa joined with another. Controversy ya soul tie inakujanga kwa definition ya what is a soul, kwa sababu kuna spirit na kuna soul. Hiyo kitu walikuwa naongea kuhusu intuition, it's a component of the spirit. But soul inakuanga na logic, inakuanga na memory, inakuanga na logic, inakuanga na will, na bado inakuanga na concept ya nini. Iko na logic, iko na will, na bado iko na seat of emotions. Bado kwa soul kuna senses, kuna sensory realm, touch, feel and all that. Bado kwa soul kuna memory, kuna subconscious, kuna conscious. So all this is the component of the soul. So wakati mse ana-engage sexually, anakuanga ame-engage emotionally, logically na will, anakuanga ame-engage memory na ame-engage the senses. So ideally unakuta kuna attachment yenye iko beyond reason. That's why unaweza break up na mse na ako majuu, lakini uone picha yake Facebook na feel kuna kitu fulani tu ime happen, kwa sababu you are more connected. Sex is beyond kufungwa trao. Sex inakuanga spiritual, social, alafu physical. So inakuanga inakuenjoy. It's serious.
Unaweza have two sex na mse bila kumuguza.
Si bado kutakuwa na contact. Hawezi unless you have sex kwa Zoom.
So your contact so what you're saying is your physical, your rubber stamp, but kuna other processes.
Inakuanga na concept ya spiritual, inakuanga na concept ya soulish, alafu sasa of course ina end up kwa physical. So most of us ufikiria it's just physical, and that's why unakutanga kuna msee anaweza have sex atoke kwa hiyo bed akifeel empty. Ajui mbona na feel empty, kwa sababu emotional temperament yake ishakuwa distorted. Then kuna kuanga na transfers. Ushaisikia ati mzee kana wife yake for long wanafanana. Kuna kuanga na transfer, kuna transactions will happen when people are having sex. That's why when you sleep with a prostitute, you become one. So hiyo nature ya prostitute inaweza kufuata pia. And it is so serious that unaweza doze na mtu alikuwa depressed na kukuwa na transaction ya depression. That's why unakutanga sexually active people with multiple sexual partners wanakuanga na multiple personalities. Junaweza mkaleo ukiwa Kinodhia, kesho mkiwa kwa Jemo. So kuna transfers ili happen.
So that's something that women should actually consider.
Even men.
When dating. Sana
yes.
Women lazima ujue kama in future unataka kufanana na umse. actually happens.
Now wakati tunaongea sasa, anything that can be tied, it can also be broken.
Okay.
That's the reality. So whatever sasa watu ukuja wanaongea ni hizo relationship, connections and all that. What you need to understand, the original mechanism ya sex ilikuwa happen kwa confinement ya covenant. Na in every covenant kuna kuanga na blood inakuanga shed. That is why a lady alikama akiwa vajo na akiwa vajo you shed blood. That is to seal the covenant of marriage. So ideally, there are so many people who are not virgins. So unaweza imagine in their first sexual encounter, kuna covenant ilikuwa sealed, knowingly or unknowingly, because these are principles. And so by the time someone anaanza kudeal na vitu kaizo, that's when unakutanga dame anaweza kuambia mi huu ndio boy alini break na hiyo memory iko fresh na sometimes hiyo pain iko fresh kwa sababu something greater than just having sex ilikuwa engaged in that moment. So ideally in those connections, that's when unakutanga kuna so ingia kwa relationships na unachoka haraka kwa sababu hauna patience ya kukaa kwa hiyo kitu na kuembrace msee na nini zenye ako nazo kwa sababu there is so much at stake, so many networks, connections, emotional entanglement na soulish entanglement.
So if as a man you have never met a virgin, you have never made a covenant of blood, so you are a virgin.
Apana. Of course now the other side, of course men lose their virginity by of course you're the first encounter of sleeping. But naangalia tu kwa hiyo system ya God ameordain a virgin na virgin wakama me together so that it's sealed through that blood. Okay. So the whole process is initiated. And that's what ukiangalia right now marriages are not working. Juu sex ili lose the place. Sex is good but iko na place ili ordainiwa ku happen. The same way there are many good things that need to happen. Na ukienda sasa uangalie for cultures that value sex and the purity of sex, and I'll mention it here, maybe it's Christianity values, but kuna liwe sometimes we are not very strict, but ukienda kwa Islam sometimes it's mandatory to be married as a virgin. You realize that there are less divorces in Islam compared to Christianity. Okay. Because of the place of sex.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Dhambi iko na science mingi yani we. What is your explanation of God? Because when we spoke, there's a conversation tulikuwa nayo naye akaniambia yeye ametafuta knowledge ya spirituality akakuwa atheist alafu sasa akarudi sasa kwa injili. So she's an atheist and a half. So so what is your definition of God?
She's a theist and I believe kuna force, but how is he describe?
Oh, okay.
Actually, atheism was a point of transition for me. Always like put it that way. It's not like I'm half atheist and a half whatever. I grew up in a Christian home, but I did not know who God was, even though I was in this Christian home. So it reached a point where, because I've always known somebody's out there watching out for me, because I've seen proof of it in my life. But the way he was represented, you know, he was misrepresented to me, and I believe that that was a misrepresentation. So when I went to, you know, throughout my life in campus, I came to a point where I wanted to establish a personal relationship with God. And so that was my period of atheism, because I was out. I abandoned everything and decided to be like an empty vessel to start looking for my own meaning of my own God. And that is when I got into spirituality. And even if you look at my page right now, I talk a lot about the Bible. And it's like I mix everything, because I believe that there are truths inside these religious connotations. But then when you ask me what is the meaning of God to me, God is nature. God is change. God is, you know, the change is the only constant in life. And to me, that is what God is. God is nature. God, whenever I look into the faces of the people around me, whenever I look into nature, that is me seeing the face of God. And so God to me is the collective, the wholeness of us as a people. So that is where God is to me, because that is where I've found my God.
So God is not a person seated on the throne?
No, to me God is, all of us are, you know, God to me is the universe. And to me human beings are a direct mirror reflection of the universe. All human beings are fragments. It's like having a gold reservoir, and then you have the fragments of gold that are in different parts of the world. So to me, human beings are just a mirror reflection of who God is.
Okay. Now from Mr. T's explanation, he says that there are different levels of, there are different realms outside this world, which kuna the dark one. How do you know you're not in witchcraft? As in
fact, the reason why I said that, I think I had an interview talking about the chakras.
Yes.
The gates. Now, those chakras is a language yenye inakuanga kwa meditation, but it's also a language iko kwa Satanism. Because you open those gates na unaanza kuinteract na spiritual realm. In fact, akikwambia kuna 7 chakras, by the time you are opening the 3rd chakra, you open the 3rd eye of the spirit. And by the time you are opening the 7, unakuanga so high spiritually, unakuanga umeadopt something inakuanga serpentine. So it ushers you to a very demonic realm. And that's why I was very sensitive, kwa sababu what the new age is doing, the Bible actually is the only book that has detailed on spirituality. But now what has happened is that there is what we are now calling involvement of demonology, the study of demons. But now it's being repackaged not as demons, but as energies, as forces, as elements. So unajua kitu pepo inakawe. Lakini ukianza kusema ni elements, ni energy, positive vibe, inakaa okay. So uchawi ya saizi imeomoka. Ni uchawi ni uchawi cool, una get? Ni uchawi unaambiwa weka 2 candles hapa, sema ta mara 7. Unakumbuka chali? Chali si ati ni Nigeria alikuwa anakuja amefunga kikitu. It was a demonic pattern on how to summon a demon. But they never told us it was a demon. They just said you're summoning chakra. Chakra hizo ni ziko kwa backbone. Hata uko nazo. Unaweza train your kuzi.
Niko na demons.
Hizo chakras. And this one I'm telling you, from a young man that I prayed for, na nilikuwa namtoa kwa Satanism. Na ndo akaniambia pasi nilikuwa nimefungua the 3rd chakra. Nilikuwa almost kuingia kwa the 3rd eye of the devil. Nilikuwa nimefundishwa kuset ma altars kwa hauna kusummon demons. But huku nje zina happen online, zina happen YouTube maidha. Na watu wanafanya hivyo, na watu civilized. Unaambia, you know, I'm just trying to find my peace. Alafu nasikia statement ni very common. You know, hii sasa ndo inaanza kusound. Waindi ndo wanakuanga na Mungu wao. Muindi atasema Kengori ni Mungu na kuworship na ukimboa kufae. That's why Indian is not a religion. Buddhism ni kitu tofauti. But that's why Indians wakuta demu ya COVID. Hindu. Yes, unakumbuka hiyo time walitupa miungu zao. So these are very sensitive statement because she's vast knowledgeable but a lot of mixing. So utakuta Luciferianism hapa, Satanism hapa, Freemasonry hapa, but in that quest of hunger, sometimes they say when you're too hungry for something, even bitter food tastes sweet. So unaweza mu acknowledge akwe sensitive, anaweza kuta mengia realms that are so deep, getting out might be a problem in pursuit of truth.
So how do you know you are not haujaingia kwa shetani? How?
I understand what you're talking about, and I'm actually getting everything that you're saying, but let me tell you, they call it witchcraft. You know, this is my understanding of it. Everything is witchcraft, even our own existence. Let me explain it. I know that sounds a little bit, you know, ish, but let me explain it. We have words. How do we interact? We have relationships on this particular realm. And you have feelings. You have emotions. You have words. You have intentions. And everything that is created on this particular dimension, before everything comes into the physical reality, it exists in a spiritual realm. And what removes it from a spiritual realm into the physical realm? Intention. And what is witchcraft? Witchcraft is intention.
No,
and there can be positive intention and there can be negative intention. I understand what you're saying.
Witchcraft is manipulation of intention.
Yeah, but we come into this realm to learn how to manipulate energy. That is everything that we come to do. Every human being comes on. Let me say, ngoja nikwambie, hata nyinyi Christians, you pray.
Yes.
Praying is manipulation of energy. Yeah. Because you go tell God that, you know, I need this and this and this. What are you trying to do to the universe? You're sending frequencies to manipulate a particular energy so that it comes into this reality, right? That is the reason why you pray. You pray to be healed. What is the intention? Prayer is intention. Witchcraft is intention. But there are people who have negative intention. Right now, when you're seated there, when you look at me, and you're like, I wish I was like that girl. I'm so jealous. I wish I was like her. I wish all the gifts that they have is sent to me. You are sending negative intentions. And the universe doesn't know the difference between negative intention and the positive intention. That is why demonic entities have as much power as light entities.
So witchcraft, no, so prayers is positive witchcraft.
Yes, that is what it is.
I wouldn't call prayer positive witchcraft because one, we pray the will of God.
Yes.
That's why kuna vitu tunaweza ombea na zita happen. So we pray the will of God. Now, you know, now she's trying to present the universe as God. The universe is a creation. It's something that God created. And it's something that God created, one, to express his majesty and also express his glory. And she says something very powerful, which was, when you look at the universe, you're able to understand God. In the book of Romans, it says, in fact, the universe is the first Bible. If you want to know how God is, if you want to understand order, if you want to understand sequence, if you want to understand patterns, connections, you now begin to look at the universe. But the universe is not God. But the universe is an expression of something we cannot see. When you look at the complexity of the universe, you end up acknowledging there's a creator. So we can't worship what was created because it's supposed to point us to the one that created it. And so now the moment we shift our focus from the creator to the creation, now that's idolatry. Because now we are trying to shape out things from what is created, and we are shifting our focus from what the creator did. Now witchcraft is when we use forces, what she's calling energies, to manipulate someone to do something against their will and against their consent. It is manipulation. So we can't have positive witchcraft. Now we are entering into what we are calling good devil and bad devil. Listen, it is either evil or godly. Because the moment we say this is good witchcraft and this is bad witchcraft, the name witchcraft cannot be accompanied with good. The name witchcraft is actually bad. But so you can't have good, ni kama kusema we have good devils and bad devils. Devil is evil. So you can't have good evil and bad evil. And that's where now the concept of new age in a come. So we are trying to take God out of the space, but we are trying to have this conversation so that and this conversation, by the way, itakuja kutulidi kwa kitu inaitwa universalism. Universalism itakuwa, by the way, the realm of the spirit is open if you want to access it, whether as a Christian, Muslim, nini. And this now, the conversation anza kutulidi kwa kitu tunaitwa new religion, new world order, one kind of religion. Because now when conversation like this begin, a lot is borrowed from the Bible, a lot is borrowed from the other part, and then it's manipulated to give a certain conversation. So when I listen to her, kuna mtu anasema, hey, hiyo ni ukweli. But kuna pale anapiga statement anasema, hapo umetutoa nje.
You know, one thing that first of all, with spirituality, personally, I don't even care whether people join spirituality or not. As long as it is working for me, I'm totally good. You know, Christians, my mom is a staunch Christian. I have friends who are staunch Christians. Yes, as long as it is working for you, go with it. I'm good, you know. As long as it is working for me, I'll go with it and I'm good. But let me tell you, who taught you that the dark was a bad thing? Who taught you that demons look scary? It's the society that we grow up in. You know,
Are you saying the devil is cute?
No, let me tell you. The idea of fear, the idea of fearing the dark, the idea of fearing the devil stems from the society's idea of fearing taking responsibility. You understand? Everybody wants to associate with their light side, you know, with the light side. Everybody wants to come and say, you know, I'm a good person. And then that one is a bad person. But at the end of the day, there are no good people and there are no bad people on this planet. There are people who are just aware of what is going on, and there are people who participate in the badness without being aware. There are just aware people and people who are not aware. There are no good people or bad people in this world. But the moment you are aware, you know, the world is a dangerous place. We know it's a man society. But the moment you are aware of your danger, because when the right button is pressed, every sane human being is capable of going against the laws of nature. But then you recognizing that I am made up of dark entities and light entities. Then you step in the awareness of these entities, both of these entities, so you are able to control them instead of sitting and denying. You know that we Christians, we are good people, we do good things. But then it's just, you do the bad things in the dark. Because we know, we've grown up in this society where people just fear the dark because they fear themselves. People fear the dark because they fear the unknown. And I want to answer you, when I talk about God, being the universe, I don't say that now I'm supporting the creation. That is just my preference of calling my own personal creator. Because In the beginning, they told you in the book of Genesis, in a beginning, you know, there was God. And there, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. God was the creation. Like, what was this word? Intention, at the end of the day. Because every time you speak, you cast spells. That is why, when you spell words, you know, you're casting a spell. Every time you speak, you're casting a spell. So, you know, articulation of each and every word is called spelling, right? So every time you speak, you're casting a spell. And this was the spell that was available with God, and this is the spell that we all have, intentions. At the end of the day, when you want to tap something into the spirit, from the spirit realm, you tap it through intention. But God created the universe. So God created himself. God created us so that he experiences himself through us. That is why your body is called the temple of God. You're just a puppet, and there is God that is controlling this particular puppet.
Okay. Yeah. So, according to your definition, Christianity is an association of cowards.
To me, Christianity is a weapon of control. There is modern Christianity, and then there was traditional Christianity, the one that our ancestors believed in, the one with its origin from Ethiopia. But then again, we have to acknowledge, if you studied, if you studied history, you studied some of the effects of Bible translation, biblical translation. With the time, it becomes biased, you know. Saizi uletewe Bible saizi, uambiwe we edit kitu watu watatumia in future. You will edit it according to your own context. And we know politics in the world, and we know governments have been involved in the translation of the Bible. It lost its meaning. It lost a lot of its meanings over time. And there are some parts of the Bible that were edited to remove black people from it. Okay. And the Bible that most of the Christians use today, it was a weapon of control that was designed to create slaves.
Okay. Sawa. If my director can give me 2 minutes for you to respond.
Yes. YouTube sees source information. And this is what I call unbiased kind of debate. Kwa sababu, it is true the Bible was edited, but again, there's the other side. You can't publish something that has errors. But otherwise, tutaanza kusuizi publication. Okay. It is true kuna vitu zilikuwa omitted. Bible may go through scholars who may scrutinize kuangalia from the original to what is there. Okay. Hakuna intention ya Bible in terms of it. Christianity kutoka Ethiopia. This is African propagandist. Na hizi ndo vitu zinaanza kuseliwa huko nje. Hakuna citation ya kitu tunaweza ita intellectual ama academic book imekotiwa. These are just ni arguments za YouTube. Hata mimi leo naweza enda YouTube nisema unajua Kikuyu walitokanga Egypt na nipige ma philosophy. Na after hapo mzee akuja asema Kikuyu walitoka philosophy. So what is happening? We live in a very polarized kind of society, and YouTube is not a library. Anyone can drop their junk there. And please, for the sake of intellectualism, it's good for us to come with facts. What she has said, majority, it's not factual. These are arguments that are in YouTube that cannot be quantified as academically factual.
They are not in YouTube.
They cannot be quantified.
When you study history, basic history.
Which history?
You know, basic history of Africa, pre-colonization period.
Yes.
And then you study the colonization period.
Yes.
And then you study the post-colonization period.
Yes.
You realize that Africa, kitambo, we had cities like Axum, we had people like Akina Solomon, and then Akina Menelik. These are descendants from Africa who came from the lineage of Solomon. And it is something that is there in history. And remember, there was a time in history.
Let me correct you. Wacha nimcorrect. Unaona sasa your example ya Menelik.
Yes.
Menelik, it's an assumption ati Queen of Sheba alienda akadozi na Solomon akarudi na ball. No history supports. Na hiyo ndio imebad Rastafarianism. Now you see what we are doing. We are throwing we are throwing jargons without what we call academic reference. There was no connection. That's why walikuja wakasema after Menelik alizaliwa ndio Haile Selassie alizaliwa, na so from the lineage of Solomon then tuko na the black
from
Messiah.
The tribe of the Lion of Judah.
So nasikia now these are things that cannot be quantified historically. Listen, there are 2 levels of history. There is academical history which can be verified through time and books are there. And then sasa kuna hii history ya kila mtu kupeana. Ni kama vile tu Kikuyu sema Mungu wetu ako Mount Kenya na alitoka huko. You can't quantify that reality through academia. So I'll encourage us, as we're having this conversation, let's come to a place of academia where we can quantify, cite and give evidence, because anyone can say anything. How do you prove that a certain city existed in the 14th century? Are there archaeological evidences? Sasa ukiniambia kulikuwa na msanii anaitwa Ananak Anakum, alikuwa Sudan, alikuwa mfalme. Ase hawezi prove kulikuwa na Ananak Anakum. You see, there's something coming and that's what she's pushing. Inaitwa African Renaissance. Na ni historia kurudisha Waafrika place walitoka, but there is insufficiency of data. So we have philosophy, assumptions and vitu tu watu wanataka kusema.
What is the reason for this insufficiency of data?
Vivian,
because
in terms of references, is there any reference you can give us yenye tunaweza enda to follow ya kusema sijui kama Queen Sheba ndiye alikuwa msupa wa
hiyo kitu ile alikuwa na ni mse wa Jamaica aliandika.
No.
That's how Nini was formed. The whole thing.
You know,
Yes.
let me tell you one thing from what he's talking about, and this is the problem that we have as Africans. This is the problem that we have. We had our own history. We had history of where we come from, okay? But then you remember during the right before colonialism, when the missionaries came to Africa, and then people like Akina Pythagoras started ransackling books from African libraries, and then universities in Africa were burnt. And then these books were, some of them were transferred to universities like Athens in Europe and everything. When you go back into the historical, and most of the time you find that during our history, Africans used to pass information through word of mouth. Yes. And also through, storytelling. And most of it, when you go down the history lane, you read about, books by people like Marcus Garvey, people like Chancellor William.
Marcus Garvey ni wajuzi.
Yeah, those are people...
Ushaifanya research ya broken telephone. Unaambia msee kitu, by the time nafikia the 9th person, see the same thing aliambiwa. So if our history was transferred by word of mouth, we don't have the genuine history. Because by the scientific evidence of broken telephone.
Even Ethiopia is even in the Bible,
Even Ethiopia is there. Ethiopia is there.
Tukifunga, give us one reference, tafadhali. Tukifunga, yes. One reference of a book we can read so that we can...
When you go to my Instagram on my highlights, there's so many books. There's so many books I've placed there that you can read about the African spirituality and African history.
Sawa.
My highlights on Instagram.
Sawa, acha tuende kwa highlights kwa Instagram. I think
Instagram is not a library. Anyway, thank you.
But that is our modern way of interaction.
Ameka reference.
Kama
ziko tangalia.
Ziko there.
Ameka reference ya vitabu. I think we need to set this up for a part 2. Kama una feel we need to do a second part of this conversation. Na hiyo part ingine tukuje na reference ya hizo vitabu wamesema. Apostle Mr. T, sijui tutakuja na Bible ya ku cross check.
Yeah, kuna books history.
Next time kama tunakuja na reference to bebe reference.
History is an open page.
The next conversation ya kufunga history tunafunga na references. Apostle Mr. T atakuja na vitabu zake, Vivian Tabu atakuja na vitabu zake. Tuone kama Mungu ni energy ama Mungu amekaa katika kiti cha enzi. Wapi makofi yao? Maze. Till the second part of this conversation. See you next week. My name is Dr. Kingori.